I never imagined betrayal could wear the face of my own family. Yet there I was, sitting at a polished mahogany desk inside First National Bank at 10:30 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, trembling as my daughter-in-law pushed a pen into my hand and whispered a threat only I could hear: either I sign away everything, or I prepare to live with the street dogs. My son, Desmond, squeezed my shoulder as if urging me to comply. But when I looked into his eyes, I saw only exhaustion and surrender. That moment was when I realized, if I didn't act, they would strip me of everything I had built across a lifetime of sacrifice. My name is Juanita Martinez, and I am 64 years old. I raised Desmond alone after my husband Roberto died in a construction accident when our boy was only 8. We had very little, but we had each other, and I fought like a lioness to protect him. I worked long shifts at Morrison's Diner during the day and scrubbed downtown offices at night, sewing dresses on weekends to make ends meet. Somehow, I held it all together, ensuring Desmond had not just food and shelter, but a future for decades. My little house stood as proof of survival, 43 years of memories pressed into every wall, every corner. Yet at that moment in the bank, Celine, my daughter-in-law, treated it like nothing more than a $350,000 asset to be liquidated. To her, it was leverage. To me, it was my life. Celine sat across the desk in her expensive dress and perfect bun, drumming her manicured fingers impatiently. She had a way of twisting every small mistake into evidence of incompetence. "You forgot the stove last week," she had claimed earlier. A lie both Desmond and I knew wasn't true. Her tone carried the sweet sharpness of poisoned honey. My son finally muttered that it was for my own good, suggesting assisted living as if I were some fragile burden. He wouldn't meet my eyes. His once bright spirit had dulled under her control. His shoulders hunched as though years of invisible weight pressed him down. When I asked what would happen if I refused, Celine leaned closer, her whisper slicing through me. "Then you'll live on the streets with the stray dogs. Old woman, because you won't be living in that house anymore either way." My heart clenched, not from fear, but from the cruelty. I glanced desperately at Desmond, but he only stared at his hands. The boy I had raised, the one who used to call every Sunday just to hear my voice, was nowhere to be found. In his place sat a hollow man, shackled by his wife's ambition. The account manager, Mr. Peterson, cleared his throat nervously. "Mrs. Martinez, I must inform you that once you sign these documents, the transactions are immediate and irreversible." His eyes flickered with unease, as though he suspected something was wrong. The papers in front of me blurred. A stack of transfer deeds, powers of attorney, liquidation orders, a lifetime erased by ink. My hand trembled as I held the pen. And then, like a flicker of grace, I noticed the security guard watching us. A young man, his name badge reading David. Our eyes met. He had seen this before, an elderly woman being cornered. And in his gaze, I saw concern. That was when the seed of an idea sprouted. I asked for a moment, setting the pen down. Selena protested, but I stood, leaning on my cane, and made my way toward the restroom from my purse. I tore a sheet from the small notebook I always carried, my penmanship still sharp despite my shaking hands. "Help me. I'm being forced to sign. Call Detective Maria Santos, Precinct 12. Tell her Juanita Martinez is in danger. Financial elder abuse. Confidential." I folded it neatly, as I pretended to stumble by David's desk. I dropped my purse. He rushed forward, and with trembling fingers, I slipped the folded paper into his palm. "Thank you, dear." I said loudly, making sure Selene could hear. Young people are so helpful these days. His nod was subtle, but his eyes told me he understood. When I returned, Celine's mask of civility was cracking, her foot tapping the marble floor. She pushed the pen back into my hand. We don't have all day. Juanita? I picked it up, but this time, I wasn't trembling from fear, I was trembling with resolve. Through the bank's glass doors, I saw David already on his phone, speaking quickly. Good. The wheels were turning. Celine leaned closer, her eyes narrowed, expecting my submission. Desmond sat slumped, defeated, a puppet in her play. They thought they had me trapped. But Celine had made one fatal mistake. She had underestimated me. Because I wasn't just a poor widow clinging to her past. I was a woman with secrets, strength, and a plan that was about to unfold. I smiled faintly, set the pen down, and whispered, Actually, I think there's something you need to know first. I let the silence stretch until even Mr. Peterson shifted in his chair. Celine's fingers paused mid-drum. The lacquered nails a row of tiny knives waiting to strike. Desmond finally lifted his head, confusion flickering through the fog in his eyes. I lowered my voice so only our table could hear. I told them that before I signed anything, we needed to speak at home privately. Celine snapped that nothing would happen except my signature. But Mr. Peterson, perhaps suspecting liability, suggested we could postpone until later that afternoon. I nodded as if grateful. When we stood to leave at 11:05 a.m., I glanced toward David. He gave the smallest tilt of his chin. The message was clear, he had made the call. The ride home was a taut wire. Celine drove my car like she owned it, knuckles white around the steering wheel. Desmond sat in the passenger seat, staring out at a city that had once been ours together. Parades he watched from my shoulders. Bus stops where we laughed in the rain. I sat in the back like a child. But inside, something ancient and steady was taking the reins again. When we turned up my cracked driveway, the roses Roberto planted 30 years ago were in full, stubborn bloom, bright defiance against the gray mood. Celine ushered us inside briskly and ordered coffee as if it were her kitchen. I settled into my favorite armchair, the one Roberto saved for all winter to buy me during our 15th anniversary, and watched her choose my good china, because presentation is the first tool of manipulation. The performance began. Celine adopted a theatrical warmth, speaking of safety and dignity while her eyes calculated square footage and account balances. Desmond hovered, shoulders caved, voice small, when I asked, gently, what exactly they had planned. Celine unveiled the structure she had polished overnight, moved me into their spare room. Sell the house at once. Transfer a substantial portion of my assets to a joint account they would manage, and wind down my sewing because independence is overrated at your age. I asked how much she meant by substantial. She said we could discuss figures in the morning, though she'd circled a number in her notes that looked like half. I kept my face calm and touched the inside of my cardigan pocket, where the small recorder Detective Maria Santos would later lend me was not yet hiding. But I already wished it were. Instead, I brought out paper. Not the papers Celine wanted to sign, but those she never knew existed. I took the silver key from my jewelry box and opened the little wall safe Roberto had hidden behind my winter coats. I returned with a worn manila folder and laid it on the coffee table like a dealer cutting a deck. Years of statements from a bank they had never heard me mention. Records of commissions from women whose names Celine would recognize from charity galas and hospital boards. When she read the balances, her mask slipped. Just for a beat. $847,000, she whispered. like a prayer to the God she truly worshipped. Desmond went pale. He asked how. I told him the truth: by work that has value because it is precise, private, and irreplaceable. By couture that fits a life as perfectly as it fits a body. Celine recovered with speed and sharpened her smile. If I had that much, she said, then of course I could contribute properly. We would accelerate the plan. We would list the house immediately. We would move funds by tomorrow at 9:00 a.m. Desmond murmured that perhaps we should consider options, but Celine's voice sliced through him. She talked about conservatorship the way some people discuss weather. Inevitable and beyond appeal. She said the words mental competency softly, as if concerned. Then outlined the steps with the boredom of someone who had rehearsed them. I felt my hands steady. There is a dignity that arrives when the truth is finally tired of hiding. I told her the number she was caressing wasn't final. There were other accounts, investments that lived elsewhere. Money set aside because being poor once teaches you never to be poor again. I saw the flush rise under her makeup. She called me a liar, a manipulator, an old woman playing games. I said I was a mother protecting her own life. She ordered Desmond to call a doctor for an emergency evaluation. That was when car doors thudded outside, firm and multiplied, and a clear knock sounded on my front door. The clock on the stove blinked 12:14 p.m. Detective Maria Santos stepped into my kitchen with 2 uniformed officers, taking in the scene like a seamstress assessing a torn hem, calm, attentive, unhurried. "Mrs. Martinez," she said, "are you safe?" I told her I was now. Celine tried to shoo them out, declaring harassment and family affairs. Detective Santos asked my permission to stay. I said she was welcome. Then I produced the little notebook that had started everything and told them what had been said at the bank and in my kitchen. Celine insisted she had only been advocating responsible planning. Desmond, crumpled in a chair, looked like a man waking into bad light. The detective asked if I had documentation of threats. "Not yet," I said, but I understood the law and had her number now. Her eyes warmed by a degree. She explained, for all ears, that this state permits a person to record conversations they are part of. She clarified the meaning of financial elder abuse with the careful diction of someone who wants a story to hold up in court. Celine paced, trapped in a room she thought she owned, shaking her head, building a narrative that sagged under the weight of its own self-interest. I thought of the seam lines I had tracked by feel in the dark, the thousands of tiny decisions the hand must make while the mind rests on a single compass. Does this hold, or does this unravel? I looked at my son, my beautiful boy dimmed by years of being told that love means control. I chose the path that would hold. I told the detective I wanted to make a formal report. I told Celine we were done signing anything except the truth. And with the steadying ritual of a woman threading her own needle, I began. The next morning dawned gray, and I felt every hour of the sleepless night in my bones. Still, I brewed coffee, set out cups, and laid the bait across my kitchen counter: bank statements, letters from clients, and one particular commission note worth $35,000 in my cardigan pocket. The small digital recorder Detective Santos had pressed into my hand the evening before hummed with potential. At exactly 9:00 a.m., Celine swept into my house with Desmond trailing like a reluctant shadow. She didn't bother with pleasantries. Her eyes darted to the papers. Her hunger, plain. She picked up the letter and read the commission aloud, her voice faltering at the number. $35,000. For clothes, I corrected her gently. For couture. The magnolia ball demands perfection. The word alone seemed to rattle her. She tried to mask it. but I saw the calculation begin again in her eyes. This was no longer about a dwindling inheritance. It was about an ongoing river of wealth. Celine's tone shifted into syrupy reassurance. This confirms what we discussed. You need help managing such sums. It isn't safe for an elderly woman to juggle finances like this. Desmond shifted nervously. Mom? Maybe Celine has a point. It's a lot. His voice cracked. The boy I once knew momentarily surfacing under layers of doubt. I looked at him steadily. Mijo, do you truly think I am incompetent? He stared at the floor and whispered. I think you need help. We all need help sometimes. And Celine pounced, her voice rising. Exactly. We will keep you safe. We'll transfer $500,000 to a joint account. Sell this too-big house and scale down your sewing. Independence is overrated at your age. I pressed the recorder's button inside my pocket, careful to keep my face neutral. And if I refuse? I asked softly. Her smile sharpened. Then we'll petition for conservatorship. You're clearly confused. We can find a doctor to agree you're not making rational decisions. For a moment, the kitchen swam, but I steadied myself. I asked to use the restroom, where I texted Detective Santos. It's happening now. Recording everything. Send backup. Her reply came instantly. Stay calm. Help is on the way. When I returned, Celine was scribbling figures on a pad, speaking quickly. We should move faster. Today we'll transfer funds. Tomorrow we'll tour facilities. It's time you had proper care. My heart thudded, but I forced calm into my voice. There's something you should know. The $800,000 you saw yesterday, that's not all. Her pen clattered onto the table. What do you mean? She hissed. Desmond finally looked up, eyes wide. Mom? How much do you actually have? I smiled faintly. Enough that I'll never need to depend on anyone. Not you. Not assisted living. Not anyone. For the first time, Celine lost control. She lunged across the table, snarling. You lying, manipulative witch. You sit here playing games while we scrape by. I stepped back, keeping the recorder hidden from her grasp. Not games. I said evenly, evidence, at that exact moment. The sound of car doors echoed in my driveway. Celine froze, confusion flickering before fear tightened her jaw. A firm knock followed. Mrs. Martinez, it's Detective Santos. Her voice carried through the door, professional and clear. Celine's face drained of color, then flared red. Desmond looked bewildered, his gaze darting between us. I opened the door slowly, cane tapping against the floor. Detective, I said. Your timing is perfect. She stepped in with two officers, their eyes sweeping the room, taking in the scattered papers. Celine's clenched fists. Desmond's vacant stare. Mrs. Martinez. Are you all right? She asked. I am now, I replied, pulling the small recorder from my pocket. I have what we discussed. Celine shrieked that it was harassment, that they couldn't intrude without warrants. Detective Santos's voice cooled. Ma'am, Mrs. Martinez requested our presence. She is reporting financial elder abuse and threats of forced conservatorship. Are you Celine Rodriguez Martinez? Celine confirmed before realizing her mistake, then floundered. I pressed play. Her own voice filled the kitchen, crisp and damning threats of throwing me to the street dogs. Demands for $500,000, promises to declare me incompetent. Desmond's face crumpled as the truth spilled from the recorder. He flinched when the words lying, manipulative witch, came from his wife's mouth. By the time the playback ended, the room was heavy with silence. Detective Santos looked at Celine, her eyes steel. What I just heard constitutes financial elder abuse under state law. You're under arrest. Celine twisted, shrieking that it was all to protect me, that she was misunderstood. Officer Rodriguez began reading her rights as she thrashed, hurling one last venomous look at me. This isn't over. I'll destroy you. But her wrists were already cuffed. Desmond sat pale, hands buried in his hair, whispering, Mom, is this really what's been happening? Yes, I said quietly, my voice steady, for 3 years. Celine's voice echoed in my ears even after the squad car pulled away. This isn't over. I stood in my kitchen, staring at the coffee cups rattled from her outburst, and felt both relief and grief wash over me in equal measure. Desmond sat hunched at the table, his head in his hands, shoulders shaking as though a dam had broken inside him. Detective Santos's calm voice cut through the silence. Mrs. Martinez, I'll need you to make a formal statement at the station. And Mr. Martinez, we'll need yours as well. She gathered the evidence carefully, sliding my recorder into a sealed bag, while her officers took photographs of the bank papers strewn across the table. Desmond finally looked up, his face ashen. Mom, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know it was this bad. His words broke something fragile inside me. I wanted to rage, to demand how he could sit silent all those times Selena belittled me. But instead, I saw the little boy he once was lost, manipulated, ashamed. Desmond, I whispered. You were under her spell. She made you believe caring meant control. He shook his head violently. I thought she was protecting you. She told me you were getting confused, that you left the stove on, forgot bills. She said you couldn't manage on your own anymore. His eyes brimmed with tears, and I believed her. I reached across the table and took his hand. It was thinner than I remembered, the wedding ring loose. She studied you as much as she studied me. That was her gift, making people doubt themselves. Detective Santos returned from a quick phone call. Mrs. Martinez, we'll pursue charges for attempted financial exploitation and psychological abuse. But there may be more here. Would you be willing to cooperate with a broader investigation? I hesitated, then nodded. I don't want anyone else to go through this. That night, after giving my statement, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my sewing table, the antique singer humming softly under my fingertips, though I hadn't threaded the needle. Memories tumbled through my mind, late nights mending gowns, the pride on clients' faces, the quiet strength it had given me. Celine thought she knew who I was, but she never understood the power of a woman who built something stitch by stitch. I sipped chamomile tea and drafted a list of everything I still had: my house, my savings, my clients, my freedom. They hadn't taken anything, and they never would. 3 weeks later, I received a call that confirmed Celine's manipulations went far beyond my family. Detective Santos told me she had unearthed similar patterns in other states, older relatives stripped of homes and savings by a young woman fitting Celine's description. In one case, the victim died before justice could be served. Another was still fighting to recover assets. It's a pattern, the detective explained. She marries or befriends into a family, isolates the elder, then threatens conservatorship when resistance comes. We believe you're her 5th victim, Mrs. Martinez, but the first to push back. The news should have felt triumphant, but instead, I grieved for the others. My survival was luck as much as resolve. That night, Desmond came by. He looked thinner, but clearer somehow, as though a fog had lifted. He handed me a small box. Inside lay my mother's wedding ring, the one I had given him when he married Celine. This belongs to you, he said quietly. I should have never let her take it. I should have known then that anyone who wanted to erase your history didn't belong in our family. I slipped it back on my finger, its weight both familiar and restorative. Over the following months, Desmond began visiting regularly. Twice a week he'd sit in my sewing room while I worked, asking questions about fabrics and clients. He wanted to understand the life Celine had tried so hard to erase. I told him stories of commissions worth tens of thousands, of society women who trusted me with their most important occasions. He listened, sometimes in awe, sometimes in guilt, but always with sincerity. Slowly, our relationship began to mend. 6 months after Celine's arrest, I received a call from a young woman named Sarah Thompson. Her grandmother was being pressured by her boyfriend's daughter to sign over her house and finances. Her name is Celine Rodriguez, Sarah whispered. My hand tightened around the phone. Celine had been released on bail pending trial, and despite the restraining order, she was already hunting again. I contacted Detective Santos immediately. Together, we formed a plan, a sting operation with Sarah's grandmother, Eleanor, wearing a recording device. 2 days later, I sat in an unmarked van with the detective, listening through headphones as Celine's voice poured through the speakers. Sweet, persuasive, but laced with menace. You're not getting any younger. Eleanor, if you don't sign, you'll end up alone in a state facility. My fists clenched. The script was identical. Eleanor's shaky voice replied, Are you threatening me? And Celine's cold laugh followed. I'm explaining reality. Detective Santos spoke into her radio. That's enough. Move in. Officers rushed the house, and within minutes, Celine's shock echoed through the feed. This time, there was no denial. With evidence spanning multiple victims and states, she pled guilty to financial elder abuse, sentenced to 10 years in prison. I didn't attend her hearing. I didn't need to. My victory had already been won the moment I decided I was worth protecting. The day Celine was sentenced. I sat in my sewing room finishing a christening gown for a longtime client. I didn't need to watch her in court. I had already heard her lies unravel and seen the mask shatter from her face. Instead, I chose to pour my energy into creation, not destruction. When the phone rang that evening, it was Desmond, his voice, calmer now than I had heard in years. Asked if he could come by. He arrived carrying groceries, just as he did every Sunday. We shared dinner at my worn kitchen table, the same table where I had once signed his school permission slips and mended broken toys. This time, we shared something even more precious: honesty. Mom, he said quietly, I know you've forgiven me, but I haven't forgiven myself. I let her convince me your independence was stubbornness. I let her silence your wisdom, make me believe love meant control. I forgot who raised me. His eyes brimmed with tears from his jacket pocket. He pulled the box holding my mother's wedding ring. This should never have left your hand. It belongs to you. I slipped it on, the weight familiar, and felt something heal inside me. In the months that followed, our lives rebuilt in small, steady stitches. Desmond helped me reorganize my sewing room into a proper studio. With new lights and storage for my growing collection of fabrics, he watched with wonder as I prepared garments that cost more than he once believed possible: a suit for $8,000. A debutante wardrobe for $35,000. You've been doing this all along, he marveled, while I thought you were barely getting by. I smiled. Sometimes mothers have their ways. Mijo. But healing wasn't only for us. At Eleanor Thompson's 83rd birthday, her granddaughter Sarah suggested forming a group for those who had endured financial manipulation. Eleanor called it the Survivors Club. 3 months later, A dozen elderly people gathered in the community library. Some had lost homes, others had fought off conservatorship petitions, but all shared stories of betrayal and resilience. Detective Santos spoke about warning signs. A lawyer offered free consultations. Mostly, we listened to each other. For the first time, many realized they were not alone. I never planned to become an advocate, yet life often chooses for us. Word spread quickly, and soon our meetings doubled, then tripled. Thank you notes began arriving from people who said the group saved them from being deceived. One woman escaped an abusive arrangement with her daughter-in-law. Another man recognized early signs when his son's girlfriend pressured him to change his will. Each story reminded me that survival wasn't just for myself anymore, it was for all of us. One Sunday evening, while Desmond washed dishes beside me, he asked, "Any regrets?" I thought of the 3 years I nearly lost, of the silence, the manipulation, the moments of despair. Then I thought of the ring back on my finger, the laughter of survivors sharing strength, the new light in my son's eyes. "No," I said finally, "because it led me here. It made me realize my strength, and it gave me a purpose I never imagined." I looked around my kitchen, the roses blooming outside, the sewing machine waiting in the other room, the life I had almost lost, and felt peace. I was no longer just Juanita Martinez, seamstress and widow. I was Juanita Martinez, survivor, protector, and teacher. And I knew no one would ever take my independence from me again. If you've stayed with me through this story, I ask you, what would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever seen someone try to control another's life under the guise of love? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice might help someone else see the warning signs. And if my story touched you, please like this video, share it with friends, and subscribe for more stories of resilience and truth.